For the Leadership, Policy and Strategy module, you have two assessments or two assessment artifacts, presentation and a reflective essay. And in this video blog, I'm going to talk you through the presentation. So as you can see, you have a 15-minute limit, which is exactly the same as previous presentations you've done, and it's worth 50% of the mark for the module. So your brief is to create a digital presentation critically analysing a new or change in policy and how it has impacted an educational setting. Now, although you can pick any educational setting, effectively we are saying that that needs to be the educational setting that you currently or work in, or a setting that you previously worked in the fairly near past. So what I want to do to start with is to talk you through what we actually mean by policy. Now, all the details regarding this are in the first topic within the Moodle content, but what I want to do is just talk you through the slight differences between them and the approaches in which you can take. So policy itself is effectively an initiative, a process, anything that guides or directs us in terms of what we do. Now, these can be created at two different levels. They can be national level policies or local level policies. So a national policy is a policy which has national significance, which has jurisdiction to have prevalence and prominence at educational establishments across a country. Now, to give you a few examples, some of these policies are things like the national curriculum in the UK, or agendas such as prevent or Ofsted inspection frameworks, for argument's sake. So these are policies that have a bearing on the strategic and operational directions that we have as educational institutions. But they're on a national level, so they cover numerous educational establishments across a geographical area. Now, local level policies are effectively operating policies or procedures. These can be things such as homework policies, the implementation of a new IT system, appraisal systems, or they can be fairly bespoke and niche policies such as open day or open evening policies and procedures on that kind of micro level, or within an establishment, they can be on a macro level as well. So it could be, the policy could be, for example, an establishment's strategic or operational plan. So in terms of how you approach this presentation, there's three ways in which you can choose a policy which you're going to examine. So you could look at a national level policy and how that has impacted your institution and the stakeholders within it, i.e. staff, students and parents. Or you could look at a local level policy and how that has impacted the stakeholders, again, staff, students and parents. Or you can do a bit of a combination of the two. So how a national level policy has impacted and shaped a local level policy within your institution, and therefore how this change in policy has impacted students, staff and parents. So what I'm going to do now is talk you through the different sections within the assessment itself. So as ever, we've done an assessment guidance document for you to talk you through some details, and within there is a suggested layout. Now, at the beginning of this, there is an element where it talks you through some, or gives you examples of previous titles, so just to give you a bit of an idea. And they are UK based, but there no doubt there'll be similar things within your local areas if you are international students or internationally based. So a few examples of the policies here are things like the early years foundation stage framework, move to linear A levels, increases in tuition fees, progress 8 measures for schools, or the impact of educational health and care plans. So in terms of a structure, nothing different to what you've done before. So within your presentation, there needs to be an introduction, a main discussion area, and then your reference list at the end, which as ever is not included in the time limit. So within the introduction, what we expect you to do is give a brief discussion around what is a policy, some theoretical background, some theoretical input, and a brief synopsis of the policy that you are discussing. And within this, a very short outline of the educational establishment that that you are looking into. As ever, this area is purely to set the scene, so please spend a limited amount of time on this. Anything more than 2 or 3 minutes is too much. So try and keep it as short, concise and succinct as you can. Within the main section, this is where you earn your money, for want of a better phrase. This is where you offer a narrative on the policy and most importantly, undertake a critical review and discussion around the impact of the policy on the establishment. Now, as ever, to access the higher grade boundaries, this critical review has to be balanced and offer various perspectives which are informed by academic literature and current research. Within this, you'll offer future recommendations and actions for your establishment to consider in the short and longer term. Again, these must be informed and justified against academic literature. Now, the key thing with all of this is that you need to be critical at the expense of being descriptive as ever before, because this will enable you to access the higher grade boundaries. So you need to make sure that you tell us what the advantages, the disadvantages, the benefits, the limitations of the policy, how it's been implemented and the impact that it's had. You know, the hows and the whys, etc. Regarding the policy that you're looking into within your educational establishment. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. This has to be informed by academic literature. So my top tip, as ever, is to move from the descriptive to the critical. So to give you a piece of guidance in terms of moving to a predominantly critical approach in your analysis, and what I'd like to do is talk through a handful of examples of previous students' work to give you an idea of ways in which you can be critical and the way you can structure your work. Now, before we actually dissect this piece of work in its entirety, if you have a look, even though it's only a handful of lines once you shrink this font down to a normal size 12, you can see there's 3 references in here. So they've used a good number of academic sources to inform their argument here. And what they've done is rather than being descriptive within their text, they've offered judgmental statements. So they're saying here that using soft KPIs potentially yields longer term success. So they're making a statement as to the benefit or the advantages of an approach. They're then in their second statement relating to how the school in question has gone about doing this in terms of their quantitative and qualitative measures that they've put in. And then finally, they're ending with why this is a good thing. So they're telling us the hows and whys, but because they're mentioning that this approach potentially aligns with the practices and beliefs of staff and prevents distortion of work duties. So they're offering a critical insight into the approach that the school is taking. In this example, the author has taken a slightly different approach to critically analysing policy formation at an establishment. Here what they've done in the initial stages is briefly explained an approach that the school has taken in terms of utilising various stakeholders in the formation of a policy. Then they've talked about and made judgments as to the benefits and limitations of this approach and the disadvantages, i.e. the issues that arise if members of staff are not or do not feel that they're part of any appraisal system in terms of its construction. And they then link that back to the previous system they had to critically analyse what was wrong with that, and then finally finish off by explaining why it is important that staff across the spectrum of the school have an input and the benefits of doing that. Again, all of the points here, whether it's the issues that can arise, the justification behind using a system that isn't subject to cynicism, and the benefits to the approach that they've taken, all are informed by academic sources. So the key message for me is that your presentation is only 15 minutes. You only have 15 minutes, which, as you know, goes like a blink of an eye. So please make sure that you look to focus your work. Your scope is narrow and you delve deeply into the element that you're exploring. Pick a single policy or procedure, either at a national level or at a local level, and critically analyse that. So ensure that you move from being descriptive. So do not tell me what the school does or what the policy is, or state different elements of the policy in great depth, because that is purely descriptive and will limit your ability to access the higher grade boundaries, i.e. anything above sort of 50, 55%. Please spend your time critically analysing, as we've mentioned before, telling us what's good, what's bad, the benefits and limitations, the hows and the whys behind the policy, its implementation, and the impact that it has on staff, students, and other stakeholders. As ever, within the assessment guidance page, there is a section which shows you some example material from previous students. Just one caveat with this is previously students were asked to write a reflective essay on this, whereas you're being asked to produce a presentation. So please look at the selection of extracts from the students' work as an example of individual statements and how you should shape and word your work. But please remember you are producing a presentation, not an essay.